You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
pegarle el Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramee here for Division II Wednesdays, joined today by DJ Switzer, Director of Communication of FC Cincinnati, and wrong side of the pond. DJ, first of all, how does it feel to be back playing in the USL now? It's been 4 games in. How does it feel so far?
See, I thought you guys were going to ask me how it felt to be back on with you guys. It's been almost a year, I think, since I was back on. So, Kevin and Duane, thanks for having me back on today. But no, it's great to be back playing again in USL. It was a long off season with a lot of preparations, and we're happy to be playing football again.
I'll let Duane jump in right now, but you mentioned a long off season, and a lot of things happen in this off season. If we go to the USL, NASL Division II, I was going to say drama, soap opera. So basically it was a kind of a soap opera. But now we have FC Cincinnati in the bidding process as well in January for Major League Soccer. How busy was the offseason for you, DJ?
Yeah, it wasn't really much of an off season at all. We pretty much, the minute the season was over, we unfortunately were bounced out of the playoffs a little earlier than we had anticipated. But the minute that had happened, we switched over to kind of MLS preparations mode. Obviously, MLS Commissioner Don Garber came to visit us in the early winter last year. So we spent a bit of time preparing for that. And then obviously there was also the bidding process that each of us here in the front office had a role to play in that process as well. So really by the time we'd finished up with that, we were well underway in preparations for this season. And here we are. So really didn't get much of a break at all through the winter this year.
We'll go back to the MLS expansion bid at the end of the interview, but that's focused for the time being on the current season, which has not started, I think, quite the way that you would have liked. The 2-2 record right now, although you did bounce back after a slow start last week. What do you think let's go positive first. What do you think the positives are so far in the season for FC Cincinnati?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned it, right? We didn't get off to the start that we had hoped to this year. Currently sitting at 2-2. Started our first 3 games on the road, which I think is certainly something that shouldn't be underestimated in the USL. It's a difficult league to travel within. But 2, remember, we had a coaching change just before the season. So Alan Koch has now taken over the team, and he's got a different way of approaching the game than Coach Harks had before. And the guys certainly going to take a little bit of time to get adjusted. And then there's the third element, which happens with every team, of course, is it's a new team almost. There are 9, actually 11 now new players within the team, a bit of changeover from last year, and several of those guys have forced their way into the starting 11 already. So it's been an adjustment period. And I think all of us here in the front office had an expectation that it would take a little bit of time to get hit the road running. But now we had a big win at the weekend. We're back playing in front of our big crowds. And that certainly is a big motivating factor for everyone. And I think we're heading in the right direction at this point.
Fair enough. I think maybe early on you weren't scoring as much as you would have liked. I think might be a fair way to put it, especially considering some of the goals that were set before the season. Do you feel that was maybe the weakness early on, just that inability to finish?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did struggle to finish in those first few games, and certainly we have an expectation that we're going to be scoring more goals than that throughout the course of the season. But as I mentioned, the guys are still filling each other out. And I think we saw a trend that was continuing from last year. As one of the quote unquote better sides in the league last year, teams tended to bunker in against us, and that was something that we struggled with in the opening couple matches. St. Louis played a little bit more openly, and perhaps that played into our hands a little bit more. So we're intrigued to see what happens this week with Tampa and Louisville both coming to visit, and seeing if we can keep that scoring streak running now.
We have, as you mentioned, a lot of new players and a lot of veteran and some young players. And of course, me being in Montreal, when I saw Mili Tamgua, Marco Dominguez being part of FC Cincinnati, it kind of gave me a reason to watch more of FC Cincinnati. What can you tell me about, and our listeners, of course, about the now dubbed FC Montreal Diaspora and how those players have helped the death of FC Cincinnati so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So Marco was the earlier of the two to make his way into our squad this year, joining back before the season started. And then Malay came in a little bit later. He was on trial with us actually down in Florida at IMG Academy, played actually in our second match against the Chicago Fire and shown well for himself. And we decided to bring him in as a way to supplement and help fill out our back line. So neither one of them have featured much for the team yet. Mele is the only one who has made it into a match. We had a sending off in our second match against Pittsburgh. In our third match, and he ended up coming on as a way of helping to bolster the team a little bit. And Marco hasn't yet made a squad, but both of them are looked at as young, promising players. We definitely see them having a future with the club. And I wouldn't be surprised to see either one of them start forcing their way into the team not before too long.
Names that will be familiar to our listeners: Omar Cummings, Andrew Weidman, a journeyman and experienced player in North American soccer, now with FC Cincinnati. And we've seen in Division 2 over the last few years in ASL or USL, teams with a core of experienced veteran players at a certain level brings a lot of success. This year is almost a audition period for teams that want to go in Major League Soccer in the near future. How strong is the Cincinnati squad to fulfill those expectations and to impress the Major League Soccer higher ups?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, the Major League Soccer bidding process is certainly in our minds, and it's something that we're focusing on to a certain extent. But really, we're much more concerned about the team that we're putting into the USL and lifting that trophy. We don't want to necessarily put the cart before the horse, and we're playing in a very competitive, very tough league. And I think a lot of people underestimate how much USL has improved over the last few years, and even from last year in particular. We're starting to see, we played Bethlehem Steel, not necessarily one of the better sides in the league last year, and they really gave us a lot of trouble. And we've seen a big improvement in some of the sides that are lower down in the table last year as well. So we're really, really focused on winning a USL championship this year, and being the best USL team that we can be. And I think our squad is very well situated for that. You mentioned guys like Omar Cummings and Andrew Wiedemann, who your listeners will be familiar with. But we have a strong contingent of players that have played at the highest levels. Just to name a few of them, Corbin Bone spent time in the Chicago Fire and Philadelphia Union. A couple different guys had played at the NASL level. Mitch Hildebrandt was a goalkeeper with Minnesota for a while. Harrison Delbridge has spent time with Sacramento Republic and is one of the rising defenders within the league as well. And so we have a very strong contingent of players. And that's not even talking about a lot of the guys that we brought in. Aiden Quinn, who was drafted into MLS as a player that played with us, Kadeem Dakers is another new player as well that joined from Louisville City. Both of them came up and crossed the river to play for us this year. And then you talk a guy like Jibby Fall. Jibby's our newest signee. He's the man who had 4 goals at the weekend and 6 on the season so far, leading the league in scoring. And he's played in some of the highest levels. He played in Denmark's Tippeligaen at the highest level and led that country's top division in scoring. Recently played in Kazakhstan and has played in Germany as well. So we've got a lot of guys that have a lot of experience, and we feel like that's going to make us one of the more competitive sides in the league this year.
You did mention the 2012 Rookie of the Year as well in that list of players that have played at a high level. How is Austin Berry doing?
Yeah, Austin is our captain, a great guy. a Cincinnati guy, grew up here in town, won a state championship playing with Summit Country Day High School, played for one of the top clubs here in the region in Cincinnati United. And Austin has struggled a little bit with injuries at the beginning portion of the season. He injured his elbow in a preseason friendly out in Sacramento, and then suffered a concussion in one of our first few matches, and was back to action this past weekend and looks to be gaining match fitness. But Austin's a big leader for us, and certainly someone who brings a lot of experience to the team.
Fair enough. I'm wondering this, and this is a difficult question to answer for anyone who works at the level you work at in terms of where the league is. But where do you think the players fit into this? What do you think they're thinking of? Are they thinking about trying to stick with FC Cincinnati and see them through this sort of MLS bidding process in the hope that maybe they might be able to go up with them down the line? Or are these guys really fighting to get noticed and to get back to Major League Soccer or to a level in Europe? Where are the players' heads right now, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you find players that span that spectrum. There are certainly some younger guys in the team that would certainly see themselves as having an aspiration to play at the highest level. And I think you could say that of just about any of the guys in the squad. They all want to be as competitive as they possibly can, and certainly aspire to play at the highest level they can. And we've proven ourselves to be a club that's capable of lifting players to those positions. Sean Okoli, the USL MVP in 2016, led the league in scoring as well. He was one of our star players last year, and now finds himself getting minutes regularly with New York City FC. So we definitely have guys that are aspiring to make that jump and play at a level higher than they currently are. But I think most everyone's devoted to the cause and wants to make the best of the situation that they're in right now.
DJ, you mentioned earlier how people would be surprised with the level of play in USL, especially this year across the board. How good in your mind has USL became this season with the amount of new teams, the amount of investment, the amount of identity of play football project that have been created in USL over the last 12 months? How good do you like the soccer basically this year so far?
Yeah, no, I think the soccer's come on leaps and bounds. To make not to inflate my own ego at all, but once upon a time, I trialed in this league and spent a bit of time with the Harrisburg City Islanders training with them. And I can tell you, I was no good player. I was a decent enough player back in my pomp, but the level now is significantly higher than it was 10 years ago when I was attempting to be reaching out for my professional dreams. And even year on year, we've seen an improvement. The Dayton Dutch Lions were a team that were local here as well. I actually live in between Dayton and Cincinnati, and spent a bit of time watching there. And when MLS first started putting their Division II teams in, I think that's when we started to see a little bit more of an increase in the regular talent that you were seeing across the league, and that steadily increased all the way to this point. And I think the Division II designation plays a huge portion of that. Everyone just looks at that as a silly designation, but it really does do something for particularly players outside of our country that are looking for a place to play, and they see that Division II status, and it means something different to them. And that's why you're seeing some of these bigger name players probably feeling more comfortable with the idea. You're seeing Omar Bravo, Didier Drogba, Sean Wright Phillips. That's just in Phoenix. And then you look at like Joe Cole and Schuler that are down in Tampa, and you can see that there's a lot of different options and a lot of different players that are coming from some classier backgrounds. And I think that's just a testament to how far the league's come in the last few years.
Next up for you guys, of course, is Tampa. So that should be an interesting measure. And they have come into this league looking pretty good. What will that matchup mean to Cincinnati? Is that something you had circled in the calendar to sort of measure yourself a little bit against one of those MLS expansion rivals?
I don't necessarily think we're looking at it from an MLS expansion rival. Of course, we had one of those in the house this past weekend with St. Louis this past weekend, although you don't necessarily know how much they're in the race at this point anymore either. But we looked at this 3-game stretch when we finally returned home as one of those kind of breaking points in our season. And it's weird to think that when it's just your 4th, 5th, and 6th matches of the year. But just Tampa this weekend, Tampa today, Louisville this weekend, but we also faced St. Louis, and those are at the time when the week started, were the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, and we knew it was going to be that way. So the guys have been really amped up for it. They answered the first challenge, and certainly I think the bigger obstacle now outside of the talent that we're going to be facing is managing the minutes. It's a lot of game time to actually force into 1 week, 3 games in 8 days. So the guys are certainly amped up about it, and we'll see what happens over the next couple days.
I'll go back to last weekend for a second with you, DJ, to talk about 23,114,000 fans. How impressive was that crowd? And what's the ceiling of the crowd in Cincinnati, if there is one?
So we were obviously delighted with the size of the crowd that we had for our home opener this past weekend. As you mentioned, 23,144 turned out for it. That was a USL home opener record. That goes along with our USL regular season record, which is about 28,000. We also have the playoff record at 30,000. And then, of course, last year we hosted Crystal Palace, an international friendly, and sold out the building at 35,000. So we can fit about 35,000 in, and would anticipate that maybe we'll be able to scrape that mark a few times this year as well. And, I think we can't necessarily go bigger, but we have aspirations of filling that building as much as we possibly can, week in and week out. And that's really a testament to the city of Cincinnati, who's gone above and beyond to embrace us. We are looked at upon as almost the third major league sports team already here in town. The Reds and Bengals are institutions within the city, and we've been embraced in a way that almost no one could have predicted. We knew we were onto something, but this is certainly exploded to a point where we're now getting the attention that we are. So it's been really fun. We always enjoy the experience. As a kid who grew up here in town, it never ceases to give me goosebumps to see that building filled with people in to watch the sport I love so much. I never could have imagined it, 30 years ago when I was growing up here.
You learned your U.S. Open Cup draw possible opponents last week. How important is that tournament? How important is getting through that next round and possibly drawing a big name MLS opponent in a competitive round later on? How important is that to Cincinnati this year?
Yeah, so it's certainly a target that we put on ourselves this year, is to succeed better than we did last year in the USL or the US Open Cup. Last year we advanced into the third round after beating Indy 11's reserves, and then ironically lost to Tampa, who's in town here today. So we certainly want to make it beyond that next stage. We'd love to have a crack at an MLS team in a competitive match, and definitely the Cup is an important part of our planning process. So we're not trying to look too far ahead right now. Obviously, we're going to have a big matchup against either Des Moines Menace or AFC Cleveland, the Menace of PDL, who have scalped more than a few professional clubs in their day, and AFC Cleveland, who are the reigning NPSL national champions. So we've got a big task ahead of us to just get to the next point, but we'd love to go as far as we possibly can in the Cup this year.
Fair enough. And let's end with a question about MLS expansion, which is something that is obviously on everyone's minds. How confident are you right now, a little bit into this process, looking ahead to the end of the year, that you will be one of those teams named for one of those first two spots? And if not, then the next two as well. How confident are you?
Yeah, so I think we have an extremely strong bid here in Cincinnati. That's a testament to the fan support that we've already mentioned a couple of times, and the amazing crowds and passion for soccer that this city has. But that's also a testament to our ownership group, led by Carl Linder III, who's heads up Great American Insurance, United Dairy Farmers here in town. He has been a tremendous asset for our organization, has really built this dream from the ground up, along with our GM, Jeff Birding, who spent 19 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think the combination of their experience, Jeff also has spent time on city council here in town, between their connections and their business acumen and experience levels working in professional sports. I think we have one of the strongest bids that are competing out there. I think everyone's certainly curious about the stadium situation here in Cincinnati, and we're certainly still working on that. But we also feel we have an amazing home in Nippert Stadium on the University of Cincinnati's campus. It's been a tremendous home for us. The fans have really taken to that. And we think that with all those pieces in place, given the process that we're building, there's an academy in the works that's in the offing. We'll have a training complex here shortly as well. We think we stand in a really good position to hopefully get one of the bids here, if not the first two, in the second two as well.
All right. I'm sure that anyone listening in your area probably knows this, but that's just for the sake of argument. Let anyone that's listening that wants to check an FC Cincinnati game out. Tell them how they can how you can get hooked up with tickets, how they can find you, and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check FC Cincinnati out on the web at www.fccincinnati.com. We're, of course, on all the social media channels, the exact same thing at FC Cincinnati. We have a beautiful brand new store downtown here in Cincinnati with an amazing hours and merchandise selection that we just opened up. So definitely check that out too. We're on local television and we'll be on national television at least once this season. So there are lots of ways to take us in.
All right, AJ. Thanks again for your time. Hopefully we'll talk again soon down the line.
Excellent, guys. Thanks for having me back on. Have a good one.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. Kevin, the dream is over for Leicester. The dream has ended.
Yes, exactly. The dream is over. It was, again, we talked about Atletico Madrid, where it's like a mirage. They make you believe that you're up and you're in it until the end when, well, you're not. Well, you only need to win by a goal, right? Doesn't matter if you win by an inch or by a mile. You need to win. And that's what Atletico makes you feel, like you're closer to it than you actually are.
Yeah, and look, there was a stretch of I guess, 20 minutes or so after Vardy's goal where certainly Leicester was making them sweat a little bit, but I think it's worth mentioning and understanding that they were making them sweat at a point when Leicester had to score 2. And, you know, they're going to absorb at that point. They're going to throw everything in front of the ball. And it's exactly what we said would happen, is that they ground them into salt, basically, and they move on. Both Madrid teams as well. We should mention that. So
the heartbreak,
final.
The heartbreak of Munich fans, Duane, where Ronaldo was offside. But, you know, it's the Champions League. It's Ronaldo. What do you want?
Well, exactly, yeah, and that whole Madrid final remains still in play. I'm not sure whether I want that again, or whether I want to see them get drawn in the semifinals, but it will be good to see them either way. Maybe I'd like to see them in the semifinals. I'd like to see them, those two Madrid teams have a Madrid derby in the Champions League semifinals, so that we get to see both of the Calderon one last time in a big Champions League game. That'd be kind of fun, I think, and that'd be something to watch out for. But a good day of Champions League action, and of course we talked a little bit yesterday about the upcoming. And I don't want to dismiss the second game, but a lot of people are going to be focusing on whether Barca can do it again. But perhaps the Dortmund Monaco game might actually be the better game to watch. But nonetheless, I think most of us will be tuned in to the old lady, see if she can finish it off.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if Juventus can pull the final trigger, or maybe the final nail in the coffin of Barcelona. 3-goal deficit Barcelona needs to overcome, but it's to score 3 goals against one of the best defending teams of the last 5 years, right? If not more. It's one of the best defense we have seen. The way they're built in the Conte eras, where they still use some of those tactics, and it's evolved a bit under the new coach, but Juve has a defend mentality, and today it's going to be what is necessary for them to make sure that Barcelona doesn't overcome that 3-goal deficit.
Yeah, it's the third most dangerous lead in soccer, a 3-goal lead, of course. So lots to play for there, but still, I always wonder when you're talking about a game like that, when you're up 3 goals, the only danger really is that you come in complacent. And I just can't envision a team of Juventus's, success, sort of preparation, like style, whatever. I can't imagine them coming in kind of complacent. I can't imagine them coming in and just sitting back and trying to absorb. They'll defend. Of course they will, because they have 3 goals to give up. But I suspect that there might be in the back of their mind, they may have only, they may be able to allow 3 goals, but if they score 1, that changes that ends it. That's going to deflate them instantly. So it always is the question of how these teams approach that. To me, if I'm in that situation when you do have a 3-goal cushion, I should say, go for the throat. Go out on the front foot and try and get that 4th goal.
Oh,
Because
and
if you
then
give
you
up
get the
one,
away
then you
goal.
can defend.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
If you get that away goal on top of it, no, like 1 goal by Juve is curtains. That's for sure.
5 at that point, right? And look, as I said, I mean, you have 3-goal cushion, so go out and open yourself up a little bit more to try and find that goal, which will kill them and kill all of their hope. If you do allow one, okay, then you adjust. Then you have a plan going in. All right, we get down to 2, then we have to, get serious about defending maybe, and you try not to panic. But I think that 5th goal, but 4th goal, which would effectively be a 5th goal, right? Well, would really be what they should be looking for too. And again, I don't want to dismiss the Monaco Dortmund game, and I think that was, I don't think there's no think about it. It was overshadowed, obviously, in the first leg by the unfortunate incident that happened in Dortmund. It is an interesting tie and something that we'll be trying to watch. I'm going to be trying to probably find a double screen to watch that one this afternoon for sure.
Yeah.
Kevin, before we say goodbye, we should maybe go back and touch on the Cincinnati situation again. The stadium is the dilemma. That's always the dilemma there, but it's really hard to ignore the success that they've had and the amount of money that's behind that.
True, but the stadium is not as bad a situation as, example, a Yankee Stadium, right? It fits better soccer than other baseball stadium. It's not that terrible. Like, haven't seen some sideline pictures and haven't seen some videos and graphic of the stadium itself. It's not ideal, but it's better than others, and it has been made to work for soccer, and people have enjoyed their experience there when there's a lot of people to watch a soccer game. So there is that aspect to it that, well, when you get up to 35,000 people, like DJ mentioned, that's not too shabby, right? And if it's not ideal, but it works, maybe it can help launch in the future for maybe a bigger soccer-specific stadium or a more soccer-conducive stadium that could be in the works later on when a franchise of Major League Soccer or just the state of USL is so big that they can afford a 45,000 seater.
Yeah, and look, this idea that you have to have a soccer-specific stadium, I think, is overstated. What you need to have is a stadium that you control. That's, I think, the biggest issue that MLS has. They don't want tenants, like pure tenants in their league, because you can't control the dates then. You might have to deal with lines in the field, which I think MLS is pretty committed to not having in their stadiums now. You don't control things. You want to at least control it. You look at Atlanta, for instance, they're playing in an NFL stadium. Look at Seattle, they're playing in an NFL stadium. But these are ownership groups that do have a certain level of control over those stadiums, even if they aren't the primary tenant. And I think that's the vital thing. So long as Cincinnati can find a home that is viable for them and allows the fans to enjoy the situation and allows them to control your dates and certain amenities like lines and things like that, I think it'll be fine. Ideally, you'd like your own, pretty little stadium, as we all would. But nonetheless, MLS has proven time and again that if the ownership is right and the money is there, they will tolerate a certain level of shared stadium, a certain level of gridiron baseball, what have you, as long as you have a level of control over it. And again, NYCFC, the Yankees are part owners, so they do have a level of control over that. That's what they want. They just don't want teams, sort of at the beck and call of whatever the primary tenant is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, it is impressive what FC Cincinnati has created from the ground up just a few years ago, from no club to a club. And now an academy's in the works. And eventually, maybe it's going to be a whole pyramid. If there's an MLS team eventually making its way to FC Cincinnati, which it is a strong bid, like DJ mentioned. It is a very strong bid, especially when you look at St. Louis, which is a direct rival, like he mentioned, and now their situation of their bid with the council putting the kibosh on the municipal funding for a potential stadium. FC Cincinnati's bid is really strong. And I wouldn't be surprised to be in one of the 4 teams, maybe not the first 2, but maybe in the 4. And you do have that potential to continue to make gains, like 23,000 for home openers, 28,000 for regular season game, playoff sellout. It is very impressive what FC Cincinnati has created in a very short amount of time.
Precisely. And we'll wrap with this. We do have to keep it a little tighter today, but I think that the model that you see FC Cincinnati using is kind of the ideal model for MLS to come in. They are an established club, quote unquote, in the fact that they played a few seasons, but they're not a club that's been around for 30 years or 40 years or what have you, which I think some complacency settles in the market when you have a lower level team that's been in forever. Now, obviously, look at Montreal, Vancouver, and teams like that did have that sort of existence for a long time, and they're fine. I'm not saying that you can't be fine, but I think now in the modern MLS era, it's ideal to be up and running at a lower level for a couple of years, prove that you can put those big fans in there, get some excitement going, immediately start talking about MLS. What Orlando did, right, as well. Sacramento, in many ways, is the same scenario, although we talked about them and sort of their frustration there. But, and again,
and
underlining my point, you flash forward. So go ahead.
Something that's we talked about more, like experience. Front office, experience for the front office. The sales team gets experience and learn what works, what doesn't work for the city, and eventually you do it in a way that it reaches more people, right? The whole way the club is run outside of the pitch, nothing to do with soccer, everything but soccer operations, right? Get experience during those USL years. So when you go to MLS, that leap is not too big, and you have experience, and you do have some good people at the right place in your organigram and your hierarchy of your company.
No, for sure. The other side of it, as I was underlining, is that you don't want that complacency to land in. And I think that that's what happens when you exist for a long time. And if you were to flash forward 10 years for Sacramento and they still don't have a team, then maybe that complacency does rock in. Maybe the fans are that initial excitement's gone. So the perfect storm is to have a very young team that is established, if that makes sense. And I think that Cincinnati is absolutely, well, there's no think about it, they are absolutely doing that model right now. And they are in with a great chance, although Detroit, I think, is the wild card in whether or not they get in. If Detroit gets a stadium, I think they're going to be in tough for MLS to ignore that market, because it is a pretty damn big market. But nonetheless, we're kind of cheering for Cincinnati because they're already on the ground. I know that Detroit has that team that exists at the NPSL, but you know what I mean. They're on the ground putting 20,000 in a stadium right now, and that's something to not ignore.
Exactly. All right, that will wrap it up for today. You can follow our guest on Twitter at Wrong Side of the Pond, Duane at 24th Minute, and myself at Kev Laramee. You can find the on-demand version of this show on Sports Podcast Network, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can get the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Until tomorrow, for a brand new edition of Soccer Today, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.